Welcome to the Get Online podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Keogh, and today we are here to discuss the Netflix documentary, Our Social Dilemma. This documentary from Jeff Orlowski explores how addiction and privacy breaches are features, not bugs, of social media platforms. It calls for an overhaul of big tech business models and ending online corporate surveillance. 2020 has underscored how much we rely on technology to connect, to learn, organize, and live our lives. But the business model of big tech poses an unprecedented threat to our human rights, harvesting and monetizing the data of a third of the world's population and trapping us in a system where we are forced to either submit to pervasive tracking or forego this critical lifeline. In the documentary, it briskly edits interviews. Orlowski speaks with men and just a couple of women who have helped build social media and now fear the effects of their creations on users' mental health and the foundations of democracy. I've asked a couple of members of the Brandlective team to join this conversation today, so allow me to introduce them. So we've got Rachel Nielsen here, who is part of our content and social team, and Mark Rimmer, who is one of our lead designers. So welcome to you both.
Hey Stacey, good to be here.
Good to be here.
Hi guys. So this is a big topic, right? It's been, happening in our WhatsApp chat, our team chat this week, all about the social dilemma and what that means for us as a digital marketing agency and someone that actually uses these networks every single day. So I'm going to start with a couple of quotes from the documentary, and then I would just love to hear, I guess, your initial reactions in terms of how, what your thoughts are, how it makes you feel. So here we go. Never before in history have 50 designers made decisions that would have an impact on 2 billion people, says Tristan Harris, who's a former designer at Google. Anna Lemke, an addiction expert from Stanford University, explains that these companies exploit the brain's evolutionary need for interpersonal connection. And Roger McNamee, an early investor in Facebook, delivers a really chilling allegation, which is Russia didn't hack Facebook. It simply used the platform. What do you guys think?
Honestly, when I first saw it, I thought it was quite scary just because of the size of these platforms and the reach that they have, the issues that they cover, everything from political campaigns and being able to destabilize countries to the psychology that it plays on just everyday users. I think, as an initial reaction, I think it's something which is quite scary and something we definitely need to dive into.
I totally agree with that. It's really scary, and these quotes really highlight something that, we all have to deal with eventually.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I found myself being quite torn watching it because, well, obviously we are a digital marketing agency and we're using these platforms every single day, and we are using the algorithms and we're using the data that is being collected to market our client services and products. So, we know that it could be used in a positive way and to help our clients achieve their goals, but there's obviously this underlying ethical negative side to it that we definitely need to chat about. So social media, it was actually created initially as a pretty awesome tool and a way of really just connecting with people. It started out as an amazing way for reuniting with school friends. There's been successful stories of people finding organ donors across social platforms. There's people that I follow on Instagram who have found surrogates to have their babies for them. There's some really amazing things that have come out of this situation. So what's the problem?
There's a myriad of problems. The thing is, it's intended for good. There's a lot of people that are able to do really good things. The groups that are available to, for people to like the same things as that they like. But not all humans are good people on top of that. There's people that have things in common, that are not
ulterior
nice things, I guess.
motives. What about
exactly.
We're all millennials, I think. Is that right? All three of us?
Yes.
Yeah.
So our generation, and we're sort of the upper end, I guess, of millennials. So all of us, we didn't have social media when we were in high school, for example. Or if we did, it was just sort of coming into play. What age were you guys when you got your first mobile phone?
My first mobile phone, I think I was about 12 years old, and it was one my parents just like lent me as like they got a new one. It was one of the big brick things, like a Philips something.
Yeah. How about you, Rach?
Yeah, I think I was about the same age, around about 11, 12, and it was just, passed down from my mother.
Yeah, I think I was 14. I'm a little bit older than you guys. I think that was probably appropriate. I know I was definitely one of the last people in my year at school to actually get a mobile phone. And it was one of those things I was pretty anti it, if I remember correctly. I thought it was very like, we used to call people that had them like yuppies and thought it was all very whatever. And now it's just mandatory, right? Like I hear of people that are giving their kids 7 and 8 year olds access to this kind of stuff. It's just it's interesting. All right, so if we're saying there's obviously there's huge challenges around how data is being used and how it's being collected and how it's being stored and used essentially against us as users by these platforms. Is there a solution? I mean, do you find watching a documentary where you're like, yep, there's a solution here? Facebook, Google, whoever it might be, they should be responsible for the content and what is being shared. What are you guys' views on that?
Well, I'll chip in here. I'm going to share a pretty unpopular opinion, but I mean, I think in terms of censorship, we have either two choices. We could have all censorship or no censorship, and I'm really leaning towards no censorship at all. It really leads into a lot of dangerous areas when you start stopping people from putting out content that they want to be creating or directing certain types of content that you are designed to watch. Yeah, I think having an overarching, like body that determines what is put out there and what is not could be more harmful than not having any censorship at all.
Like what we see in China.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's not good. But one of the things as well, Rachel, you have to remember there's a lot of dumb people out there, unfortunately, that will believe anything that they read, and that's one of the big things with fake news. So actually Twitter at the moment, what they're doing is they have a fact-checking service which they've put on their on the US government accounts, and they're fact-checking a lot of the tweets that they're putting out there. Donald Trump being one of them. In fact, I think he was one of the first. So that's like something that, rather than, I'm against censorship as well, and I think that fact-checking services like this could be extended across most of social media as a way to stop misinformation being spread by a lot of these people that are in some of these groups, especially on the negative sort of side of things, being spreading that information.
Holding a place of power or influence, you mean? So not being able to just say whatever they want to say. It's honestly, this is a really difficult argument, I think, on both sides, because there's parts of that I listen to and I'm like, Mark, yeah, I agree. Like I'm obviously not a Trump supporter, but I think some of his stuff possibly should be censored. But then I completely agree with Rachel's opinion that that's a very slippery slope, right? Like once we begin going down the route of censorship, there's a lot of control that we are giving up, and a lot of our own human rights, a lot of our own freedom of speech that then becomes, well, we are not free people, in my opinion. Let's play devil's advocate here. So the flip side to this is the documentary obviously painted social media in a pretty negative way. We kind of watched that family unfold where we're watching, how the kids are influenced by different platforms, and, there's some pretty dark stuff that actually happens. So let's play devil's advocate by thinking a little bit around, is all of that true? Like I was pretty shocked at how appealing people find the idea that social networks are uniquely responsible for all of our problems. I think it's possibly a little ironic that the film that warns us about platforms using misinformation to stoke fear and outrage seems to exist only to stoke fear and outrage. I think, propaganda and bullying and this misinformation, I think they're a lot bigger than just social. I think it's really complicated. And I think, the film, they sort of briefly mention that Facebook owns WhatsApp, obviously, that it spread misinformation around lots of different things that happen around the world. The film doesn't, however, mention that WhatsApp works almost nothing in the same way that Facebook does. So it's highly private, encrypted messaging. There's no algorithm that's interacting with us and tracking what we're doing. So, I don't think that it necessarily gave a true view on all of, the internet. Perhaps it was very social focused. And I think we all know, right, like radicalization doesn't just happen on Facebook and YouTube. Some of the most deadliest far-right killers were apparently incubated on really small forums. So, the Christchurch mosque killer, the Oregon mass shooter, Tree of Life synagogue, the Norwegian terrorist, they were all conditioned on a white supremacist website, Stormfront, which is 23 years old. It's been around a long time, way before social media. So I don't know that the social media sites are primarily to blame. I'm sure they have played their part. But though, some of these independent websites, they're not driven by an algorithm or by profit motives. They're not earning money from running ads in the same way that Facebook and Google are. So, instead they twist and exploit an open internet positive ability to connect like-minded people. So, when harmful content, I guess, surfaces on them, it raises a pretty complex moderation question, which is, I guess, kind of what we've been getting at. But, if we think about when things started out, like Facebook, I guess, started out as a force for good initially. I don't think it started out to be this huge conglomerate that it is right now. But one of the things they actually did mention throughout the documentary was Facebook may be the greatest tool of persuasion ever created. What do you think that means? Like,
I think it is a big platform that is able to target each user individually within their own psychology to, either persuade them to buy something if it's an ad, or to look at the next photo in terms of like what they've already been looking at on those micro levels. Like, it is definitely a persuasion thing. And the more that they add up, it gets to a bigger thing. But saying that as well, we're all operating on different sets of facts as well.
Yeah, that was a really interesting point that was raised in the documentary, is that we all see our own facts. We get put in sort of an echo chamber, I think they described it as, where we just keep getting the same content coming back to us again and again and again.
Yeah.
And it's just creating a whole different reality bubble.
Yeah, right. Like,
we
all
different from everybody else's.
Completely. I actually have a story about this kind of in my own personal experience relating to Brexit. So maybe a controversial subject, but when Brexit was happening, all of our listeners will hear from my accent and probably from previous episodes that I am not British. So I hold a British passport. I'm a citizen here. I have been for over 14 years, but I hold dual citizenship, and essentially I grew up in New Zealand. So very different. I didn't have a lot of understanding really around what Brexit would mean. So I took that pretty seriously, and I did a lot of research to understand, what does leaving the European Union really mean? And I read a lot of articles. I watched a lot of news. I actually attended some debates where I saw, politicians and journalists argue both sides, like what it would mean to leave, what it would mean to stay. It's probably the most research that I have done with any moment in time when I have gone to vote. I put into that decision-making process. And I did sway back and forth a little bit, but then came to the fundamental decision that I actually was a Remainer. I thought that we should stay. And so when, the news broke that Brexit was happening and we were leaving the European Union, I was shocked. Like, I remember that day so vividly because I honestly did not see that happen. And the reason that was such a huge impact on me was I realized I'm in a bubble. Like, even though I try to expose myself to every piece of information out there around this, I was having conversations with lots of my friends, with my family, with my boyfriend's family, with business owners, and I never met a person who voted leave. And I was like, whoa, like, wow. I'm in a bubble like that. And that scared me quite a lot because I just thought, okay, I don't have a diverse enough group of people around me to actually understand, in a really, really important decision. I'm not saying it was a wrong decision or a right decision or whatever, but it made me very, very aware of like my own reality, which is scary, right? Which is exactly what we're talking about here. Was it social that influenced me? Not necessarily, because I went and sought the information out everywhere. I went to live debates and all this kind of stuff. So it wasn't all online, but yeah, pretty shocking. So I guess on the sort of fake news point that's kind of just been raised is, I think on the Social Dilemma documentary, they talked about how it is spread 6 times faster than real news. And I guess the reason that happens is the truth is boring, right? Nobody really wants to hear that. And there were, a couple of examples. So, Rach, do you want to maybe explain the flat Earth scenario that they discussed on the documentary?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the Brexit, it is very difficult to be objective, isn't it? When you're surrounded by people who are telling you
the same thing. Yeah,
the same thing, exactly. There's actually a really good documentary with Benedict Cumberbatch about Brexit, actually, and they described the whole campaign around it as the best marketing campaign ever devised.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, that's a statement and a half, that.
Isn't it? Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
But another really good example of, getting into this echo chamber is Kyrie Irving from the NFL. He was an NFL player, and he describes how he got thrown into a rabbit hole of checking out all these different YouTube videos to do with flat Earth, and then he became a real advocate for flat Earthers, and he just got caught up in all these different, facts, quote unquote.
It was crazy, right? Like, it was crazy that he was caught up in that, but then eventually had to come out and actually admit that, it was YouTube like influenced me to that level, and actually I was wrong. And that he came out with a public statement to say, I was wrong, the Earth is actually round. But then to see like what happened off the back of that, which is all of these people came out and they were like, the round Earthers got him. They got to him, like he got that. Like there was
got to him.
Well, it kind of goes to show how much, I guess, social is contributing to the, conspiracy theories and all this really challenging stuff. Like one other example that came up on the documentary was Pizzagate. And I actually have, unfortunately, it's quite a vague memory of this, but essentially from what I understood, there was a conspiracy theory that there was a pizza chain that was essentially a front for human trafficking. And that when you called up to order this pizza, actually you were ordering a slave, essentially, which was crazy. And what happened with that is Facebook's algorithm picked up on it because the story went viral, right? And everyone's sharing it. Facebook's algorithm picked up on that and then ended up targeting conspiracy theory groups, so people that are interested in anti-vaxxing and all these other different conspiracies, and targeted them, suggesting they also join Pizzagate groups. So really elevated and escalated that piece of content, which actually resulted in a gunman showing up at a pizza shop. Like, that's the extreme, I guess, of how quickly things can go out of control and become kind of crazy. It's scary.
It is crazy, and it's not just that as well. Like, obviously there's so many of these conspiracy theories, and right now one of the big ones is the coronavirus, that it's all a hoax, that it doesn't exist, and that really what it is the 5G towers are giving you the virus or the sickness of it as well, and I believe that's led to people going and blowing up some of these towers. I'm not sure exactly whether it's in the US or in China, but they've been blowing up towers because of this 5G stuff. And, people really do believe these things just when they read it, and it goes back to like Google. Like, you can Google something and type it in Google and a different answer will come up depending on where you are and the user profile that you have.
Yeah. So like we say, you're operating on a different set of facts. It's pretty crazy, right? I mean, if we can't agree on what is true, how does this get managed, or what is the solution?
That's such a loaded question. It's very hard because people are in these groups, aren't they? And they really believe it, and they feed off each other. And the algorithm kind of doesn't help that either. It just kind of reinforces that fact, of the things that you believe, Well,
it comes back to the censorship thing, doesn't it? Because essentially, any platform can't how can they know the difference? Like, how can Facebook know what is true and what is false?
It comes down to us as users, doesn't it? That we have to be more mindful of what we're consuming and who is paid for this.
Yeah, putting in a little bit more research. I mean, we kind of touched earlier on, a lot of these things were created for, with good intentions. I think the documentary made it all out to be really, really evil. And, I think there's definitely a strong argument that it's quite manipulative in some ways. But I think it's also important just to remember that it's not like it happened with intent. It's not like any of these people necessarily started out and thought, let's figure out how we can change the fabric of our society. It was very much with good intent. And I think when you listened on the documentary to one of the guys that created the like button on Facebook, he was like, that was invented to spread positivity so that when you posted a picture, people would like it. It made you feel good. Like, it was done with a good intention. It's just that intention has scaled into something else. I mean, I have a question. Do we think people are fundamentally good?
Well, look, the way I see it is people are born, they don't know anything, the way you're raised and the people that you have around you shape you, and they give you your first sets of beliefs as such. I mean, I personally believe no one's born a racist, that it's a taught thing, and it's something that comes from the people around you,
The reason I asked the question is, like, if we are the ones who we're basically I think we're agreeing on is that we don't think the platform should be responsible, because how can they be? We don't see a way that would be a reality. So if the pressure is on us as humans and, do we think people are fundamentally good people? Therefore, we're not at as much risk as this documentary made out.
It's to do with the algorithm, like the algorithm, it's only getting better and better at serving optimized content. So, how can we as marketeers support, the clients that we have, right? To use it as a force for good. There's people that are in groups, that are helping the world, through mental health groups, we've got technology groups, people that are inventing things that are going to help us, even throughout the coronavirus, they're coming up with great technology and we're helping to spread that, to try and get, positivity out of it.
Yeah. So I think, like, I get there's always going to be the interesting story, right? Is like, yeah, the Russians hacking and how it's super negative and we're infiltrating our brains and we can no longer make decisions for ourselves. Obviously, that's like a way more interesting story than actually just educating users on you need to be conscious with your decision making and how you're using these platforms. But I guess I like to be an optimist and think that we can make our own choices. We do have that ability, and that we just need the education or the awareness to know, like, what to look out for, really. So yeah, like Mark, you mentioned like the mental health thing, as an agency here, we work with a mental health organization, right? And I was thinking a lot about this as I was watching the documentary, which was, okay, if these platforms do have the level of information about each of us, as they say they do, which I think is proven, why does it always need to be used in a manipulative, negative way? Like, why can it not be used for good? And I think that is how we as marketers are already using it, right? Like, Brandlective as an agency, we love to work with just that, social businesses that make social impact, businesses that are doing something in a sustainable way, businesses that are focused on environmental impact. So for us as marketers that are using these tools like Facebook, like YouTube, like Google, the businesses that we are representing and the types of ads that we are running, yes, we're playing on the psychology and behavioral activities of users, but the information we're serving them is actually positive. And I think, we're not at a point where we can solve every single mental health crisis, for example, I'm thinking the mental health client we're working with. But if Facebook really understood the deep level of somebody's mind, could it not be used to a point for preventing suicide or for getting them the help that they need at the right time because they understand them that significantly? I just think I guess, I don't know, am I being naive or that this can be used for something in a really, really positive way?
No, I agree. I think it definitely can. I think like that's the next step that we need to get to with these. And I'm sure there's a lot of technology at these companies like Facebook and Google, Apple, wherever, that they have a lot of that technology waiting to go that they probably just need to refine. And we all know as well that AI self-learns and gets better as time goes on as well. So I see it as a real possibility, of course.
Rach, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I love the mental health angle as well. So, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I was writing a blog for the mental health company we work with, and it was on suicide. So I Googled, a bit of research, and first thing to come up on my Google was, do you need any help?
Yeah.
With a mental health number. Yeah. It was, wondering if I was suicidal.
If you were researching suicide for yourself. Yeah. I mean, I think I just had a flashback to you sharing that with me. And that's amazing, right? Like that is a positive thing.
Yeah, it can be used for good. There are ways around it. We just have to be focused on it and we have to want to do it.
Yeah. Okay, so for those that are listening and maybe that have watched the documentary and were maybe totally freaked out, what kind of advice or tips do you think we could leave our listeners with that actually, it's not about being scared of this type of technology and this data that's being collected, but actually it's really just about being educated, I think is what we're saying, right? It's about knowing that this information is being collected about you, and to be conscious of how you use the platforms so that this is a really silly example, and maybe this is, not something I should be sharing with all our listeners on the podcast, but I'm quite lazy sometimes. And if I know that I've seen a product that I want to purchase and I just think I'm going to come back to it, and then it goes out of my mind and I'm like, oh God, I can't remember that brand name, or I can't remember like exactly what website it was that I saw it on, I will just talk about it out loud with my phone present. And within 10 minutes, usually, I will have the ad reserved to me, ready for me to make my purchase. Like, that is a way that I do use the technology. I know that sounds really stupid, but that's useful to me.
It is useful, definitely. And honestly, I swear that I've thought of things before and then it's appeared on Facebook ad or a Google ad as well.
Yeah, that's the bit that gets scary. Yeah.
Yeah, like the magic.
What were you going to say, Rach?
Yeah, I mean, just the other day I was looking for a wireless, like an internet company for my flat, and I was on the phone talking to my partner, scrolling through my Facebook, and then it just popped up. So
yeah. There you go. Instant result. Don't forget to do this, Rach. Here's your to-do list. Sign up.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, at least good targeted advertising. So I guess it can be useful. We just need to be aware of the risks, and we need to be aware of how our data can be used both positively and negatively, I suppose. Okay, so as I mentioned, for those people that have a little bit freaked out, maybe what kind of advice do you reckon we could leave them with? Rach, do you want to start off with a couple of points?
Yeah, so for starters, I would recommend reducing the number of notifications that you're getting, so you don't have something constantly buzzing away in your pocket. And secondly, I think it was a really interesting point that the guy who invented the algorithm for recommended videos, he says not to use his own program that he designed, and to be really aware of what's coming up next and why that video is being recommended to you.
Yeah, so just being aware. Yeah, I think it's good. I have switched off all my notifications and I have realized it makes a massive, massive impact. And one other thing actually I did this maybe a year ago and then I forgot about it until I watched this Social Dilemma documentary again, which can be quite useful. Or it makes you very aware of your addiction to your phone. So it is the grayscale. I don't know if it's across all devices. I have an iPhone. But there's an option where you can turn on grayscale, so your entire phone goes black and white. So all of the apps, everything. And what it does is it makes you very conscious of when you pick up your phone and open an app without even thinking. You're suddenly like, oh, everything's black and white. And so then I'm like, wait, why am I picking up my phone? Put it down, continue with my work, like stop getting distracted. So that's a nice little tip to try if you find that you can't literally keep your phone in one place for like an hour. Mark, how about you? You got any tips?
Yeah, I would say so. Before you share an article, make sure you fact check it. You got to consider the source before you send it out there. Do like an extra Google if you can, because like we all have things that we like or we want to share or whatnot, or interesting bits of information, because I guess that's how it kind of starts in your mind, and you're like, oh, that's interesting, but it might not be true, whether it's 10 facts about this, or if it's, about the coronavirus or whatever, especially, you should probably just Google it to make sure that there's credible sources out there as well. I think that's one good point. I would say as well, if you're a parent, consider how much screen time that your kids get and be aware of what platforms that they're actually using as well. As a parent as well, I definitely am conscious of that. And, as my little girl grows older, I'm just going to be making sure, that I'm on top of it and that I'm aware of what she's doing and the people that she's interacting. Because I think that's one of the things that can definitely be an issue in the future, especially if you look at some of the statistics that were in the documentary, if you haven't seen it yet. As well, I would say, basically just choose where you get your news or insights from. Follow sources that you don't agree with, and that's to be exposed to different points of view, to get a balanced view. It could be political, it could be, for any topic that you're interested in. Those are the three main points that you should probably take away that I've got to tell you.
Yeah, I love the last point because I found myself doing this a lot recently. This is a very quick story. I traveled to the US a few years ago and stayed with a friend of mine's parents. They were addicted to the news. They watch the news. They're retired. They watch the news all day long. And for anybody that watches American news, it's like, I know all news is sort of like censored to a certain point and, controlled, but in the US, it definitely is next level. And I was shocked. So it was clearly, I can't actually remember the network, but it was very, very different from possibly stuff that I'd been exposed to before. And I didn't necessarily think in a positive way. And it's just interesting that, these, I think in the US, I don't even know how many networks, there's hundreds of them, but they're actually owned by just two people, I think. I might be getting that wrong. I probably should actually fact check that before I go spreading fake news, but I'll put it into the show notes. But, you suddenly realize like this is a very controlled environment, and actually it's not necessarily the full truth. It's very selected in terms of what you get delivered. So definitely agree. I found myself doing this a bit on Twitter now or Instagram. Like I'm trying to follow people that I don't necessarily agree with just so that I can be exposed to different points of view, because I think that is a good thing, right? I should be challenged on my thoughts. I think, and since I shared the Brexit example with you guys earlier, like that made me very, very conscious of the fact that I need to broaden my, the demographic of people that I get my source from, my education from. I'll add a couple of things. So just know your power. Every time you click, you're essentially voting for that piece of content. So if you are drawn to fake news or clickbait, you're financially incentivizing that platform to continue to put out fake information. So, just know your power and choose cautiously what you're planning, what you do click on. And then the final point really is just like make a decision to keep your devices out of your bedroom. I think I'm definitely guilty of this, of like, I'm going to go to bed now. And then I get into bed and I get on my phone and I start scrolling through stuff. And then before I know it, I've been on there an hour and I'm like, what the heck? I'm supposed to like be getting an early night. So I think just being really conscious of like putting your phone away half an hour before you go to bed so that you're not infiltrated with or distracted by notifications and content. I think it's a really good thing to do for our mental health. And that was my final point. Do you have any final things that you guys want to share with our listeners before we wrap this episode up?
I would just say, just be aware of what you're doing and how you're using your social media. There's so many platforms out there. Be aware of the screen time that you're getting as well. There's a world out there on top of all this.
Yeah.
And understand as well that we can use these platforms for good things as well. Yeah.
And if you see content out there that's fake news or that you don't like that opinion, don't engage with it. Just move on. Like there's enough negativity and stuff in the world. So
Yeah, that's a good point. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining me today and having this conversation. I know it was obviously a hot topic within the team when the documentary launched on Netflix. To all of our listeners, if you haven't seen it yet, definitely check it out, and then maybe revisit this episode. You know, we definitely didn't want to freak you out and panic you, because we are optimists and we do believe that actually a lot of this can be used in a really, really positive way. So thank you for joining us today. Thanks for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this episode, we would love you to give us a 5-star review on iTunes and write us a review and send us in your questions. Like, what else do you want to hear from us? What else do you want to know? And until then, we'll see you next time.